Viewer discretion is advised. What follows is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is a word-for-word account of courtroom testimony from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. No one saw it coming. The room was tense. Everyone was watching, waiting for the next witness. Then, suddenly, the back doors opened, and in walked Will Smith. You could hear people gasp. Even the judge paused. There was no announcement, no statement. Just Will, walking in on his own. Until that moment, he hadn't said a word publicly. His name had been everywhere. Headlines, leaked court docs, even audio clips so disturbing they weren't made public. But something had changed. Maybe it was the rumors. Maybe the betrayal by people he once trusted. Maybe it was hearing that tape behind closed doors. Whatever it was, Will was done staying silent. He didn't show up as a Hollywood star. He showed up as someone who had seen too much and stayed quiet too long. And when he started talking, no one was ready for what he said. What he shared about Diddy, the parties, the control, the fear, wasn't just shocking, it was a warning. That day had started like any other in the Diddy trial. Quiet chatter filled the courtroom. Reporters scribbled notes. Lawyers whispered. Everyone expected the next scheduled witness. But when Will Smith walked through that side door, alone, without a lawyer, without any fanfare, the entire room changed. The moment Will walked in, the room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others assumed it was a publicity stunt. But the way Will moved, calm, focused, serious, told everyone this was something else. The easygoing attitude people remembered from Fresh Prince was gone. This wasn't an act. Even the judge looked surprised, and Diddy, who had been sitting back confidently at the defense table, suddenly looked uneasy. Will walked straight to the witness stand. He didn't look at anyone, not even Diddy. "I wasn't asked to be here today," Will said. "I asked if I could speak." The judge gave him the green light. From that moment, everything changed. What Will was about to say wasn't something the media had covered. It wasn't part of any rumor online. It was something personal. Something that had weighed on him for years. It started at a party, one that was supposed to stay secret. "I've kept this to myself for a long time," he said. "I've smiled at premieres, accepted awards, made movies about doing the right thing, but none of that changes what I saw, what I went through, or who was responsible." Then he turned slightly toward Diddy and said, "You did?" Will explained how it all began, like many things in Hollywood, with an invitation. It came from someone he had worked with before. The message was simple. It was Diddy's birthday. Just a fun night with music, industry people, a chance to relax. Will had been to events like that plenty of times. He didn't think twice. But when he arrived, something felt wrong. The party was at a huge mansion in the hills. Black SUVs lined the front. Security was tight. As soon as he stepped inside, they took his phone. "They said it was to protect everyone's privacy," Will said. "But it felt like they didn't want anything recorded." He was led inside. The lighting was dark. The music was low and strange, rhythmic, almost trance-like. There weren't any visible cameras, but mirrors covered the walls. Will said it felt like someone was always watching. After a few drinks and some light conversation, things started to feel even more unsettling. Will said that Diddy came up to him directly at the party. He smiled and said, "Now you're part of the family," but it wasn't a friendly smile. Will described it as cold, more like control than welcome. Thinking they were going to discuss business, Will followed Diddy into a back room. What he saw there, he said, was something he'd never forget. Inside, people were performing, men, women. Some were familiar faces from the entertainment world. Others looked far too young. There were people watching, treating it like a show. And Diddy? He was laughing, acting like it was completely normal. Will paused, clearly shaken, then said, "I didn't know how to leave, and that was the point." Once you're in, you're in. A few days later, he got a call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end said just one thing. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince." Then it hung up. At first, Will thought it was a strange prank, until an envelope showed up at his office. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. "I almost didn't look," he said, "but I did." The footage showed him at the party, sitting on a couch. He looked clearly out of it. "I don't remember being that far gone, but there I was, laughing at something I couldn't even recall." Then came the voice behind the camera, Diddy's voice. "That's how we keep him." Will said the fear he felt in that moment was like nothing he'd ever known. "That's when I realized I wasn't just invited to that party. I was initiated." That, he said, was when the manipulation began. He started getting more party invites, but he always turned them down. Then strange things started happening. Movie deals he was in talks for vanished. Longtime collaborators stopped responding. Online rumors began to spread. Claims he was unstable, that he was cheating, that he was gay. "I knew what it was," he said. "It was pressure. Diddy didn't have to threaten me. He just made it clear. Silence was the price of keeping your life intact." So Will kept quiet. He smiled in interviews. He ignored the gossip. He focused on work. But the weight of what he had seen never left him. Then, as more people began to speak out, Cassie, Dawn Richard, even Meek Mill's name being pulled into the mess, Will asked himself, "Why am I still silent?" He looked slowly around the courtroom, his expression steady. Will said Diddy didn't just damage people's careers. He made them afraid to tell the truth. And that, he explained, is what finally pushed him to come forward. He paused, looked at the jury, then leaned in slightly toward the microphone. It wasn't just the video. That was the leash. From that moment on, Will said, everything in his life felt controlled, like there were strings attached to every opportunity. He described how things would change behind the scenes if he said no. Invitations would come through his agent, parties, meetings, projects, but when he declined, doors started closing. I'd turned down a Diddy event, and the next week, a project that was greenlit suddenly wasn't. It kept happening. It became a pattern. Will said Diddy didn't need to issue threats directly. He had people who handled that. Publicists, bloggers, producers. He knew who to call and how to make problems show up out of nowhere, and he knew how to make opportunities disappear just as fast. One example stuck with Will. In 2013, he was lined up for a major international campaign with a luxury brand. We were in the final stages. I'd even shot part of the lookbook, he said. Then, out of nowhere, the brand dropped him. No explanation. 2 weeks later, I got invited to another one of Diddy's parties. I turned it down again. Not long after, gossip blogs started publishing stories about me. Really specific stories. Things only someone close to me would know. He called it psychological warfare. At first, you feel paranoid, like maybe you're imagining it. But then the pattern becomes clear. The invites, the punishments. You're not crazy. You're being boxed in. Will said he knows other celebrities who are going through the same thing right now. Some can't speak because of contracts. Others are just afraid they'll be exposed or ruined. Then he turned to Diddy and said clearly, "You didn't just collect people. You controlled them." Everyone in the courtroom understood exactly what Will meant, but he didn't stop at describing Diddy's manipulation. Will explained that Diddy's influence went far beyond just artists. It reached deep into Hollywood itself. You couldn't step onto a major stage without bumping into someone Diddy helped put there, he said. Will shared a moment from a 2016 charity gala that stuck with him. Behind the scenes, top figures from music, film, politics, and tech were all circling Diddy, thanking him, treating him like the one holding it all together. I watched a high-level executive from a streaming platform hand him a USB drive and whisper, "Only you have the final cut." Will didn't say what was on the drive, but he said it confirmed what he had suspected for a long time. Diddy wasn't just connected, he was controlling who got in and who didn't. He talked about seeing actors, rappers, and public figures act strangely submissive around Diddy. They laughed too hard at his jokes. They waited for his approval before speaking. They acted more like they feared him than respected him. I realized a lot of them weren't his friends. They were survivors, Will said. He admitted that one reason he stayed silent for so long was fear, that speaking out would end his career. But then I realized I was already being blackballed, not officially. No list. Just whispers, doubts, and doors closing. The only reason he stayed in the public eye at all, he said, was because the audience, the fans, didn't let him disappear. That's the one thing Puff couldn't control. The people. Over time, Will said he began to look at things differently. He revisited old videos, event photos, press junkets, and saw how Diddy's influence was always there. If not physically, then behind the scenes. And then, he said, came the moment that changed everything. His voice dropped, slower and heavier. I stayed quiet for 20 years. I told myself it wasn't real, or at least not happening to me. But then the tapes started coming out. At first, Will didn't believe it. He'd heard about secret recordings being played in court, but figured it was just more noise, until he got a phone call. Not from a prosecutor, not from a reporter, but from someone he once trusted. They said, "Will, you're on one of those tapes. They played it yesterday. People are talking." Will described the feeling as if the floor had dropped out from under him. I didn't even know a tape like that existed. But once I accepted it might be real. He trailed off, letting the weight of it hang in the room. Will said that once he accepted the tape might be real, everything started to make sense. He stayed up all night, replaying the memories in his head, the party, the blackout, the mysterious envelope, the blocked calls. It was all part of a system, he said, and I was one of the victims. But fear wasn't what finally pushed him to speak. It was shame. I realized that if I stayed silent, that silence would become my legacy, and I couldn't live with that. He thought about his children, about how they would eventually read the headlines, maybe even his grandchildren someday. I had to speak. Will told the court he was the one who reached out to the prosecution. I called them. I said, "I'm ready. Whatever you need, whatever questions you have, I'll answer them." Then he turned to the jury. I wasn't just pressured. I was manipulated. I was filmed. I was used. Finally, he looked directly at Diddy, his voice harder this time. And you knew exactly what you were doing. He closed his eyes for a moment before continuing, as if bracing himself to relive a moment he had worked hard to forget. When the prosecution asked if he wanted to hear the recording, he hesitated. But I knew I had to. It was played in private. No press, no jury. Just the judge, the legal teams, and Will. I heard myself laughing, he said quietly. But it wasn't real. It was hollow. I didn't sound drunk, I sounded drugged. He described the background noise on the recording. Low music, soft voices, the occasional shout or cheer. Then came the voice that sent chills through him. And then I heard Diddy, clear as day, saying something like, "That's how we break them in." And then I heard my name. Will's voice dropped as he recalled the moment. On the tape, people were saying his name while doing things he couldn't bring himself to describe. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was horrifying. He paused, trying to steady himself. There's a difference between feeling ashamed and having your humanity stripped away. That tape, he faltered, voice cracking for the first time. It took something from me. Will looked down for a few seconds, then continued. I never gave permission to be recorded. I didn't agree to be a part of any of that. But Diddy recorded it. He kept it. Maybe to use. Maybe just to hold on to. Either way, it wasn't his to take. He said he had spent years wondering why he'd get anxious when certain names came up, why simple interviews would trigger panic. Attacks. Now I understand. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't unstable. I was remembering something I didn't want to remember. Hearing the audio forced him to face everything, the manipulation, the grooming, and the betrayal by people who had watched and done nothing. But what haunted him most, he said, wasn't what he heard. What shook me the most was what I couldn't remember. He turned to the jury. If you want to understand how powerful Diddy is, ask yourself this. How could someone like me stay silent for 20 years and not even realize it? By the time Will's testimony hit the press, it was too late for Hollywood to control the fallout. Clips from the courtroom spread online before the bailiff could even call a recess. Hashtags exploded. Our Will speaks. Freak off tape. Diddy files. For the first time, the public wasn't seeing Will as the clean-cut A-list actor. They saw him for what he truly was, a survivor. I knew that once I spoke, things would get ugly, Will said, but I didn't realize how fast. Will told the court that just 24 hours after he testified, 2 brand deals were pulled. Another studio paused promotion for a film he had already finished shooting. But to him, it didn't matter. I already lost something more valuable years ago. My voice. Then the calls started. Quiet ones. Some were messages of support from actors, producers, even directors. Others were warnings. One said, "You don't know who you just declared war on." Another, "You've made yourself radioactive." Will didn't name names, citing legal concerns. But when the prosecution asked specifically about Kevin, Hart, Meek Mill, and Lucian Grange, he gave a small nod. This isn't just about Diddy, he said. This is about an industry built on silence, and for years, people have been trading in that silence like currency. He admitted he believed more damaging material about him might surface now. I know there's probably more footage out there. I know they'll try to spin this, say I'm unstable, broken. Let them. I'm not here to protect myself. I'm here to protect the truth. He told the court he expected blowback. Expected Diddy's team to attack his credibility. To accuse him of making it all up. They'll say I'm bitter. They'll say I'm hiding something. But ask yourself this. If I were lying, why would I come forward now? Why now when I have more to lose than ever? And then he delivered a line that froze the entire room. Sometimes the truth comes late, but it still hits like thunder. The judge gave Will permission to make a final statement directly to Diddy. Will rose from the witness chair, walked a few steps forward, and looked Diddy in the eye. You built an empire out of manipulation, he said. You called it success. You called it culture. You called it love. He paused, then added, but all you really built was fear. Diddy didn't say a word. He just sat there, frozen. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something, but he didn't move. Will didn't flinch either. I saw what you did to those girls, Will said. I saw what you did to me. I heard the things you said when you thought I wasn't listening. He paused, his voice steady. You broke people. For fun. Then Will reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photo. This was me in 2004, right before the first party. He held it up for the court to see. That's who I used to be. I haven't seen him in years. Will turned to face the jury. If you think this is just about Cassie or me or one night at some mansion, you're not seeing the full picture. This is about power, a system built to bury the truth. And if we don't break it now, it'll keep going. He looked at Diddy one final time. "You once said, 'Nobody parties like Diddy.' Well, nobody lies like you either." Then Will walked back to the stand, grabbed his things, and left the courtroom. He never looked back. Diddy sat still, pale, hands trembling. And for the first time in decades, he wasn't the one in control. When Will stepped off that witness stand, he didn't look like someone who had won. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. The courtroom sat in silence. Even the judge seemed shaken. A few jurors wiped away tears. And Diddy, who had once swaggered through life, had nothing left to say. Will didn't speak to reporters outside. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply walked out of the courthouse with his head up, but carrying the weight of 2 decades of silence and pain. Later, when asked by a journalist if he felt relieved, he quietly replied, "Relief isn't the right word. It's just finished." But while it ended in court, the reaction outside had just begun. Hollywood went into quiet chaos. Executives started canceling meetings. Talent agencies hit pause on deals. Directors and producers who had once bragged about working with Will Smith were now being swarmed with questions. People who used to say he's family were now releasing cold, carefully worded statements about their deep concern and commitment to the truth. Behind closed doors, crisis teams scrambled. PR firms sent out internal memos urging clients to publicly distance themselves from any past association with Mr. Combs. While many acted shocked, the internet was already doing what it does best, digging up the proof. Old clips surfaced, showing Diddy rubbing elbows with big names, parties where everyone looked too tense to just be having fun, interviews where guests carefully avoided certain questions. There were even videos of Will Smith from years ago, visibly uncomfortable whenever Diddy's name came up. Most painfully, fans shared dozens of clips from Will's Fresh Prince days, pointing out how he seemed to be smiling through something deeper. The reaction wasn't just surprise, it was anger. Anger that Will had to face this alone for so long. Anger that whispers of abuse were dismissed as conspiracy. And anger that the whole system stayed silent for years. But Will didn't stay quiet. The day after his testimony, he posted a simple message online, a black and white photo of himself, as a young actor in 1993, standing on a film set, smiling toward the sun. The caption read, "He didn't know what was coming, but he made it through. I'm proud of him. No hashtags, no name dropping, just that." The response was immediate. Millions shared it. Tens of thousands left comments. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people thanked him for his bravery. Most of all, survivors of abuse, especially men, flooded the post with their own stories. "You gave us a voice," one wrote. "If Will can speak, so can we." Back inside the courtroom, Diddy's team was scrambling. Rumors spread about more subpoenas going out, not just to musicians and assistants, but to executives at record labels, distribution companies, and media giants. Will's testimony didn't just expose one man, it cracked open a dam. Now, the flood was coming.